When we hear Black Plague, we think of mass graves, silent streets, and a world collapsing under fear. But history has a darker twist. While millions died, some people grew rich. Yes, in the shadow of death, fortunes were made. As the plague wiped out nearly 1/3 of Europe's population, something unexpected happened. Labor became rare. Fields were empty, workshops abandoned, and cities desperate. Survivors suddenly held power. Peasants who once begged for work now demanded higher wages. Skilled laborers doubled or tripled their pay. The poor, simply by surviving, became valuable. Then there were the landowners and merchants who played the long game. With entire families dead, land flooded the market. Prices collapsed. Wealthy elites quietly bought farms, homes, and businesses for a fraction of their worth. When the population slowly recovered, those same properties became gold mines. Rent soared. Influence expanded. Even church institutions and moneylenders profited. Fear drove people to donate land and wealth to secure salvation. Debts were inherited, not erased. While bodies filled cemeteries, treasuries quietly filled vaults. And let us not forget traders of necessity, those selling food, medicine, cloth, and coffins. In a world obsessed with survival, essentials became priceless. Prices rose. Profits exploded. The Black Plague was not just a medical disaster, it was an economic reset. It destroyed the old order and rewarded those positioned to exploit scarcity, fear, and opportunity. So the uncomfortable truth is this: the plague did not make everyone equal in suffering. It reshuffled power, and once again in history, catastrophe became a ladder for the few who knew how to climb it. The Black Plague was one of the deadliest events in human history, killing nearly 1/3 of Europe's population in just a few years. Entire villages vanished, cities emptied, and families disappeared overnight. At first glance, it appears to be a story only of loss and suffering. But beneath the overwhelming death toll, a profound economic transformation was quietly taking place. Mass death did not just destroy lives, it disrupted the entire economic system. Scarcity replaced abundance, and that scarcity created unexpected opportunities for those who survived or were positioned to act. Before the plague, Europe was overcrowded. Labor was cheap, land was scarce, and peasants had little bargaining power. Lords dictated wages, and workers had few alternatives. The plague shattered this balance. With millions dead, farms lacked hands, workshops stood idle, and entire trades faced extinction. Suddenly, labor was no longer replaceable. The same work that once paid barely enough to survive now became essential to keep society functioning. Scarcity transformed labor into a valuable commodity. This shift meant that survival itself became an economic advantage. Those who lived through the plague found themselves in a world desperate for their skills and effort. Landowners and employers, once dominant, now competed for workers. Wages rose sharply, sometimes doubling or tripling. People who had spent generations trapped in poverty discovered leverage they had never possessed before. Death had reduced competition, and opportunity emerged from absence. At the same time, the collapse in population triggered a dramatic fall in prices for land and property. With families wiped out and heirs non-existent, homes and farmland flooded the market. What had once been unattainable became suddenly affordable. Those with savings, access to credit, or political influence recognized this moment as a rare opening. They acquired assets at historically low prices, fully aware that population recovery would eventually restore demand. Mass death, tragic as it was, functioned as an economic reset button. This transformation exposed a harsh reality: disasters do not affect everyone equally. While the majority suffered, a minority was positioned to benefit. Scarcity created winners not through innovation or hard work alone, but through timing and survival. The plague dismantled old hierarchies and rebuilt them in new forms, often concentrating wealth even further. Opportunity did not disappear during the Black Plague, it changed hands. In this way, mass death became more than a humanitarian catastrophe, it became a turning point in economic history. It revealed how fragile systems truly are and how quickly value shifts when scarcity strikes. The Black Plague proved that when the world collapses, the rules of wealth are rewritten. And those who understand scarcity are often the first to profit from it. One of the most dramatic changes brought by the Black Plague was the sudden reversal of power between employers and workers. Before the plague, labor was abundant and easily replaceable. Peasants, craftsmen, and servants had little choice but to accept whatever wages were offered. If one worker refused, another would quickly take their place. This imbalance kept wages low and workers dependent. The plague shattered that system almost overnight. As millions died, the workforce collapsed. Farms were left unattended, harvests rotted in the fields, and skilled trades faced extinction. Blacksmiths, masons, carpenters, and weavers became rare. Cities that once bustled with activity struggled to function. Employers who had once dictated terms now found themselves begging for help. Survival turned ordinary workers into a scarce resource, and scarcity shifted power. Those who lived through the plague discovered something entirely new: leverage. A peasant could refuse unfair conditions and walk away knowing another lord needed labor just as desperately. Skilled workers moved from town to town, negotiating higher pay and better treatment. In many regions, wages doubled or even tripled within a generation. For the first time in centuries, labor had a voice strong enough to challenge authority. This sudden rise in wages terrified the ruling elite. Governments attempted to intervene by freezing wages at pre-plague levels. Laws were passed to force workers back into old contracts and punish those who demanded more. But these measures largely failed. The dead could not be replaced by legislation. Employers still needed hands, and workers knew it. The market, shaped by loss, proved stronger than law. Beyond wages, working conditions improved. Survivors demanded fewer hours, more food, and greater personal freedom. Serfs escaped long-standing obligations by moving to cities or different estates. Social mobility, once nearly impossible, became a real possibility. A farmhand could become a tenant. A craftsman could open a workshop. The rigid hierarchy of medieval society began to crack. However, this empowerment came at a cost. The wealth gained by workers was born from tragedy. Their advantage existed only because millions were gone. Still, the change was undeniable. For a brief period, ordinary people experienced economic dignity and choice. The Black Plague revealed a timeless truth: when labor becomes scarce, power shifts downward. Survival transformed workers into negotiators, not servants. In the aftermath of unimaginable loss, the people who remained discovered that their hands, skills, and time were suddenly worth more than ever before. While surviving workers gained bargaining power, the greatest and most lasting wealth from the Black Plague flowed upward to those who already possessed resources, connections, and foresight. The massive death toll created an unprecedented collapse in property values. Entire families disappeared, estates were left without heirs, and towns contained more empty buildings than occupied ones. Land, once the most valuable and contested asset in medieval Europe, suddenly became abundant and cheap. For the wealthy, this was not chaos, it was opportunity. Before the plague, land was scarce and tightly controlled by inheritance and feudal obligations. Expansion was slow, and acquiring new property required power or marriage. The plague shattered these constraints. With owners dead and lineages broken, land flooded the market. Desperate survivors sold farms, homes, and workshops simply to secure food or protection. Prices fell dramatically, sometimes to a fraction of their former value. Those with capital stepped in quietly, purchasing vast holdings while fear dominated public life. Merchants, nobles, and urban elites understood something crucial: population loss was temporary, but land endured. They acquired property not for immediate profit, but for future dominance. As the population slowly recovered, demand returned. Rents rose, agricultural output stabilized, and property values surged. What had been bought during a moment of collapse became a foundation for generational wealth. The plague did not destroy elite power, it reshaped and often expanded it. This consolidation of assets also translated into political influence. Land meant control over food, labor, and taxation. Those who accumulated property during the crisis gained leverage over recovering communities. Villages that had once been independent became dependent on new landlords. Economic survival tied people to those who owned the land beneath their feet. The tragedy also allowed elites to renegotiate social arrangements. With new holdings, they restructured contracts, imposed rents instead of traditional obligations, and adapted to a wage-based economy while maintaining control. Even as workers earned more, they often paid higher rents and prices to landowners who now controlled larger territories than ever before. This process revealed a harsh pattern repeated throughout history. Crises tend to reward those already positioned to exploit instability. While the plague temporarily weakened old structures, it also cleared obstacles for consolidation. Wealth did not vanish, it concentrated. In the end, the Black Plague acted as a massive transfer of assets. Death created vacancies, fear created bargains, and recovery created profit. The elites who bought when others were desperate emerged stronger than before, proving that in times of collapse, ownership, not survival alone, determines who truly becomes rich. Beyond landowners and laborers, powerful institutions and credit holders quietly expanded their wealth during the Black Plague, often in ways less visible but far more enduring. Fear reshaped behavior. As death spread rapidly and unpredictably, people searched for meaning, forgiveness, and security beyond the physical world. This fear-driven psychology became an economic force, one that institutions such as the church and financial lenders were uniquely positioned to benefit from. During the height of the plague, many believed the disease was divine punishment. Facing sudden death, individuals rushed to secure their souls. Wealthy families donated land, money, and property to religious institutions in exchange for prayers, masses, and the promise of salvation. Some transferred entire estates to monasteries and churches, believing spiritual insurance was more valuable than material wealth. These gifts were often permanent. When donors died, the church retained ownership, steadily accumulating land and income across regions. At the same time, clerical institutions benefited from their continuity. While families and private enterprises vanished, churches endured. They had administrative structures, legal recognition, and collective ownership that protected assets from fragmentation. This stability allowed them to absorb wealth at a moment when most social structures were collapsing. Over time, religious institutions became some of the largest landholders in Europe, their influence strengthened by fear-driven generosity. Moneylenders and creditors also profited in unexpected ways. Although many borrowers died, debts did not simply disappear. Obligations were often inherited by surviving relatives or absorbed into estates. Creditors with legal authority collected land, goods, or labor as repayment. In a period when liquidity was scarce, ownership mattered more than cash. Lenders converted unpaid loans into physical assets, further consolidating wealth. Additionally, the chaos of the plague reduced oversight and regulation. Financial practices that might have been contested in stable times went largely unchallenged. With courts overwhelmed and communities fractured, those with legal knowledge and documentation held immense power. Written contracts outlived human lives. Paper, not people, became the strongest currency. Even charitable actions generated long-term returns. Institutions providing food, burial services, or care for the sick gained trust and influence. This moral authority translated into donations, exemptions, and political favor in the years that followed. Compassion and capital quietly merged. What made institutional wealth especially powerful was its endurance. Individuals could die, but institutions persisted. Their accumulated land, debt claims, and authority survived generations. While ordinary people experienced temporary gains through higher wages, institutions embedded themselves deeper into the economic foundation of post-plague society. The Black Plague revealed that wealth does not always grow through production alone. Sometimes it grows through fear, belief, and structure. Institutions and credit holders understood this reality. While the world focused on survival, they secured permanence. Turning catastrophe into lasting control over land, money, and influence. One of the most unsettling lessons of the Black Plague is that catastrophe does not distribute suffering or opportunity evenly. While death struck across all classes, its economic consequences followed a familiar pattern. Power and wealth were reshuffled, not erased. The plague did not level society. Instead, it exposed how crises often act as accelerators, rewarding those with position, resources, or foresight while deepening vulnerability for others. At first, the scale of death suggested total collapse. Kings, priests, peasants, and merchants all fell to the same disease. Yet equality ended at the grave. The aftermath revealed stark differences in who could adapt and who could not. Those with land, capital, or institutional protection could wait out the chaos. Those without were forced to sell, migrate, or submit. Survival alone was not enough, the ability to navigate disruption determined outcomes. Crises strip away normal rules. Laws fail, traditions weaken, and markets behave irrationally. In this uncertainty, individuals and groups with reserves gain an advantage. They can buy when others must sell, demand when others must accept, and plan when others are consumed by fear. The Black Plague magnified this dynamic. While workers gained temporary leverage through scarcity, lasting power accumulated where ownership and organization already existed. This reshuffling also reshaped social mobility. Some rose unexpectedly, but many fell permanently. Families that lost all heirs vanished from history. Their property did not disappear, it was absorbed. Meanwhile, survivors with connections consolidated influence. The result was not a fairer system, but a reconfigured one. Power changed hands, yet it rarely moved downward for long. The plague acted like a reset button, but one controlled by unequal players. It cleared debts for some, but reinforced them for others. It weakened old elites, yet allowed new or adapted elites to emerge stronger. Institutions that could outlive individuals gained dominance, while fragmented households struggled to recover. Recovery itself became a profit center. This pattern is not unique to the medieval world. The Black Plague simply reveals it in its most brutal form. Disasters compress time. They force rapid decisions, expose vulnerabilities, and reward preparation. Those who control resources during recovery often shape the new normal. Wealth, in this sense, flows toward stability, not suffering. The true lesson of the Black Plague is uncomfortable but enduring. Tragedy does not automatically produce justice or equality. It rearranges power. And unless systems are deliberately rebuilt with fairness in mind, crises become moments not of shared recovery, but of concentrated gain. History shows that when the world breaks, it does not break evenly, and neither does the wealth that follows. The story of the Black Plague is not only a story of death, but a mirror held up to human society. It shows us that even in the darkest moments, economic forces do not pause, they intensify. While millions perished, the world did not simply collapse, it reorganized itself. Labor gained value, land changed hands, institutions expanded their reach, and power settled where structure and ownership already existed. What makes this history uncomfortable is not that some people survived, but that suffering and opportunity moved in different directions. Survival gave workers temporary power, yet lasting wealth flowed toward those who controlled land, credit, and institutions. Fear, scarcity, and desperation became currencies of their own. The plague did not erase inequality, it reshaped it. This is why the question, who got rich during the Black Plague, matters. It forces us to confront a timeless truth: disasters are not just human tragedies, they are economic turning points. They reveal who is protected, who is flexible, and who is forced to sell their future to survive the present. The Black Plague teaches us that crises do not automatically create fairness or justice. Without conscious choices, they reward preparation, position, and power. History remembers the dead, but it also records the deals made in their absence. And if we listen closely, it warns us that whenever catastrophe strikes, wealth will not disappear, it will move, often into fewer hands, shaped by the same forces that still govern our world today.